Far away in the quiet land of Midian, Moses had become a gentle shepherd. Every day, he led his sheep through the hills and valleys, finding green grass and clear water. His life was simple and peaceful, and his heart was calm. But God had something important for Moses to do. Watching nearby, as always, was Matthias the mouse. He scurried along the rocky paths, always keeping close to Moses. Matthias liked to sit on a smooth stone while Moses watched over the flock. Moses is patient and kind, Matthias thought. God has been teaching him so much. One day, Moses led the sheep far into the hills, to a mountain called Horeb. As he guided the animals, he noticed something strange. "Look over there," Matthias squeaked, pointing with his tiny paw. Moses turned and saw a bush on fire, but it wasn't burning up. The flames danced and glowed, but the leaves stayed green. "That's amazing," Moses said, stepping closer. "I need to see why this bush isn't burning." Matthias followed him carefully, his little nose twitching. As they got closer, a voice came from the bush. "Moses, Moses!" Moses stopped and answered, "Here I am." "Take off your sandals," the voice said. "You're standing on holy ground." Matthias's eyes grew wide. He realized it was the voice of God speaking to Moses. "I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob," God said. Moses quickly took off his sandals and covered his face. He listened closely as God spoke. "I have seen my people suffering in Egypt," God said. "I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring them out of Egypt." Matthias's tiny heart thumped fast. "Moses? Go back to Egypt. That's a big job," he thought. Moses was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "Who am I to do this? How can I lead the people out of Egypt?" God answered kindly, "I will be with you." Still, Moses was unsure. "What if they don't believe me?" he asked. God gave Moses special signs to show them. He even gave Moses his brother, Aaron, to help him speak. Matthias watched as Moses took a deep breath. "I will go," Moses said. "I will do what you ask, Lord." The next morning, Moses packed his things and kissed his wife, Zipporah, and his son goodbye for now. He promised to return. "I am going back to Egypt," Moses said. "God has called me to help his people." Matthias climbed onto Moses' shoulder as they walked toward Egypt. "You're very brave," Matthias whispered. Moses smiled. "I'm not brave on my own," he said. "God is with me." And as they traveled, Matthias knew this was the beginning of something amazing. The end. Moses and his brother Aaron stood at the edge of the desert, looking toward the grand land of Egypt. It had been a long journey from Midian, and Moses held his shepherd's staff tightly in his hand. Sitting quietly on his shoulder was Matthias the mouse, who had stayed close to Moses through every step. "God is with us," Moses said softly. Matthias wiggled his whiskers. "Yes," he squeaked, "and he has a mighty plan." When they finally reached the tall gates of Pharaoh's palace, Moses took a deep breath. They walked inside, past the golden walls and stone pillars. Pharaoh sat on his throne, wearing a crown and holding a scepter. He was the most powerful man in Egypt, and people believed he was like a god himself. Pharaoh thought he was in charge of everything. Moses stepped forward bravely. "God says, 'Let my people go,'" Moses said. Pharaoh frowned and shook his head. "Who is this God?" Pharaoh asked. "I do not know him. I am Pharaoh. I make the rules here." Matthias peeked from behind Moses' robe. He could feel the tension in the room. "This Pharaoh has a hard heart," Matthias whispered. Pharaoh didn't believe in the one true God because he trusted only in himself and the gods of Egypt. He didn't want to listen to anyone, not even the God of Moses. But God had told Moses that he would show his power, and Pharaoh's heart would be stubborn. So Moses and Aaron came before Pharaoh again. Aaron threw down his staff, and it turned into a snake. But Pharaoh's magicians did the same. Pharaoh crossed his arms and shook his head. "My magicians can do tricks too," he said. "Why should I listen to your God?" Matthias shook his tiny head. "He doesn't understand yet," he sighed. Then God told Moses to go to the Nile River. "Strike the water with your staff," God commanded. When Moses obeyed, the river turned into blood. The fish died, and the water smelled bad. People could not drink from it. "This is the first plague," Matthias whispered from the riverbank. "Pharaoh must see God's power now." But Pharaoh turned away. "My magicians made water red too," he said. "I do not believe in your God." His heart was still hard. After 7 days, Moses and Aaron returned to Pharaoh. "Let God's people go," Moses said. But Pharaoh refused again. So God sent the second plague, frogs. Frogs jumped everywhere. They were in the houses, in the beds, even in the ovens and bowls. "Ribbit, ribbit," echoed all over Egypt. Matthias chuckled. "I like frogs, but not that many." Pharaoh begged Moses to pray to God and make the frogs go away. Moses did, and the frogs died. But as soon as they were gone, Pharaoh changed his mind and said no again. He didn't want to give up his power or admit that God was in control. Next, God told Moses to stretch out his staff and strike the dust. And the dust turned into tiny gnats, flying all around. They bit people and animals, and they were everywhere. "This is the third plague," Matthias said, brushing gnats away from his ears. Even Pharaoh's magicians told him, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh shook his head. "I will not listen," he said stubbornly. "I am Pharaoh." Moses looked up at the sky. "God is not finished yet," he said softly. And Matthias, resting on his shoulder, nodded. "God will keep his promise," he whispered. And both of them trusted that God would take care of his people. The end. Moses and his brother Aaron stood bravely before Pharaoh once again. The mighty ruler of Egypt still wore his golden crown, and his throne sparkled in the sunlight. But his heart was still hard. He did not want to listen to God's message. Sitting quietly on Moses' shoulder was Matthias the mouse, watching everything with wide eyes. God told Moses he would send more signs, Matthias whispered softly. And God always keeps his promises. Moses spoke firmly. God says, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh shook his head. "I will not," he said. So God sent another plague. The fourth plague was swarms of buzzing flies. They flew into Pharaoh's palace and all over the land. There were flies in the houses, flies in the fields, flies buzzing everywhere. Matthias ducked behind Moses' collar. "Too many flies," he squeaked. But Pharaoh still said, "No." Then came the fifth plague. All the animals the Egyptians owned, The horses, cows, camels, and sheep became very sick, but not one animal from the Hebrews was harmed. Still, Pharaoh refused to listen. "No," he said again. Next came the sixth plague. Painful sores and boils covered the skin of Pharaoh's people, but Pharaoh still would not let God's people go. Then God sent the seventh plague, a mighty storm of thunder, hail, and lightning. The hail crashed down and ruined the crops. Trees were broken and plants were smashed. Matthias shivered. "This storm is powerful," he said. Pharaoh begged Moses, "Please, pray to your God to stop the storm." Moses prayed, and God stopped the hail. But once again, Pharaoh changed his mind and said, "No." Then came the eighth plague. God sent clouds of hungry locusts. They ate every green plant and tree that was left in Egypt. Pharaoh begged Moses again, "Pray to your God and take the locusts away." Moses prayed, and God sent a wind to blow the locusts away. But Pharaoh still would not listen. Next, God sent the ninth plague. Darkness covered Egypt for 3 whole days. It was so dark that people couldn't see each other. But there was light where the Hebrews lived. Pharaoh called Moses again. "Go," he shouted, "take your people." But still, Pharaoh's heart was not ready to let them go completely. Finally, God told Moses there would be one last plague. It was a very serious and sad plague. Moses told Pharaoh what would happen, but Pharaoh refused to listen, and then it happened, just as God said. That night, God's angel passed through Egypt, taking people away, but God kept his people safe because they trusted him and followed his instructions. At last, Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron. "Go," Pharaoh said quietly, "take your people and leave Egypt." Moses and Matthias stood very still. "God has made a way," Moses whispered. And though they were not yet on their journey, they knew the time to leave was near. God had kept his promise. The end.